about personal responsibility and how we think it saved our marriage.
It saved it before it even really began, in a way.
It saved our relationship, our partnership, and it continues to save our salon and relationships. And honestly, it's one of the first things that I go through with students who start working with me. I think personal responsibility is grossly underrated. I think a lot of people think that they think that they're responsible or they're taking personal responsibility when sometimes they're not. Yeah. So we wanted to talk about it today in terms of like how it is for like all parts of life and our relationship. And my voice is a little raspy. We did go to Disneyland yesterday. I screamed
Which is
a
something we
lot.
can say a lot of days of the year.
Yeah, it's probably going to be, I
Recurring
don't know if it's
theme.
going to be a recurring theme of I can't talk. My voice is raspy because we were at Disneyland. But
She likes to scream on Big Thunder Mountain.
I do like no, I think for me this time around it was Incredicoaster because Viola and I were sitting side by side together and we were just hamming it up. All right, so personal responsibility. What do you think of when you hear the words personal responsibility?
Well, I think in the past I might have thought it was like a dig at my ego. Like, you need to take personal responsibility. And I would
Like just
immediately,
anybody saying it
yeah,
like out in the world,
I
you would
think
have
I
been
would have been
like,
like,
ugh, rude.
of course, everyone takes responsibility. I don't know. I don't really, I probably didn't think about it much. And I probably would have thought that, it's just somebody trying to tell me what to do, which I naturally push against.
Yeah.
But once we got married and I started to realize, or even when we started dating, and I started to realize, like, I don't think we would have called it that back then.
No, we knew nothing back then. We were babies. We were
Yeah,
19 years old when we started dating.
yeah. But I think we would have.
And neither of our parents were like therapists.
No, and not very personally responsible for things sometimes. But
Yeah.
no, I think it was something that I had to learn. We both had to learn
Yeah.
about, like, I remember when we first got married. This is such a small example, but I sat down to eat dinner and I just started eating, and she's like, "Oh, like, where's my food?" And I was like, "Oh, it's in the kitchen." And she's like, "Did you get me a fork?" I was like, "No." She's like, "Are you gonna wait for me to eat?" And I'm like, "Oh yeah, I'm married now." Like, I should probably
Well,
think
for
about it.
me,
And
this is when I was like, oh, you grew up as a single child. Like
yeah,
that's how I was like, oh, you grew up just being like, I get myself a fork, I get myself my food. And I was like, I grew up with like sisters where it's like we get each other forks, we get if I'm getting a fork, I'm getting three forks, I'm getting two forks, like whoever's there. So that was when I
and
was like, oh, you were raised a single
yeah, and I grew
child.
up with my dad. Like, we'd sit down in front of a baseball game and just eat at the
Yeah.
in the living room. It wasn't like we sat around a table and waited to eat.
Yeah.
That wasn't a thing. So,
Yeah.
anyway.
I think when I look back and I think of what I would have thought personal responsibility was, I think I had loads of personal responsibility because I am very quick to take the fault and take blame. So all because of the way I grew up where I was like everything's my fault, everything like I have to take blame for it. So I always felt like stuff was my fault, stuff was like yeah. So I thought that I was personally responsible because I was very quick to be like, it's my fault. I did something wrong. I know I did something wrong. I'm in trouble.
So you thought personal responsibility meant taking the blame for everybody else's
Yes.
not taking personal
Yes.
responsibility. Yeah.
100,000%.
So you were the opposite of me.
Yes. So when I started coaching and when I started learning, what actual personal responsibility was, I realized like personal responsibility means that everything in my life, like where I live, who I'm around, the relationships that I have, are all my responsibility to either change or to continue to go deeper or to set boundaries or to like I was responsible for them.
Mm.
And I think that it's something that a lot of people like we live in this state of like I'm just reacting to other people. So like in my instance, I was just reacting to the world around me and just always being like, okay, it's my fault. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. Right? Like that was like my like track that I would say over and over again. It was like, I'm sorry. So I feel like for me it was realizing like, oh, but I actually have responsibility for like the people that are in my life, the way that they treat me, the way that they think it's okay to treat me, where I'm living, the work that I do, the clients that I have, like all of those things are because of the decisions that I've made. And I think personal responsibility really is taking power and control over the decisions that you make because the decisions that you make create the reality around you. So I think that personal responsibility is so much deeper than just being like, oh, it's my fault. Sometimes it's not my fault. All right. And sometimes your ego does have to be like, yeah, this is my fault. Like your ego had to be like, yeah, that I have a role to play in this. Like, so yeah, I think that the personal responsibility sometimes is a lot different than what people would naturally think that it is.
And I think I learned it automatically in a way in our marriage because that makes a lot of sense how you said you used to take the blame for things because I think I would do things or say things that would probably upset you, but you would just kind of hold it down and be like, "Oh, well, maybe I'm just taking it too much, taking it too hard." Or,
Mm-hmm.
and then after a while, it would build up to the point where you'd finally snap and go like, "You need to stop doing this." And then I would be super literal and say, "Well, name all the times I've done it before."
Oh my gosh. And like our son is exactly that.
True.
So now you get it. You get it.
I have to deal with it. No, but I get it now because after a while, I started to realize I started to just tell, we had to learn each other and be like, Joy, if I say something that bothers you, just tell me immediately. Don't
Yeah.
wait till time 10 where you're already upset and then you're emotional about it and then my ego gets bruised because I think I'm doing everything wrong.
Yeah.
And instead, if you tell me, it became a thing where you would tell me, and yeah, my ego would still get bruised a little bit, but it got easier and easier to the point where neither one of us were super hyper agitated about it, and it became a
Yeah.
thing where you could be like, "Hey, when you said that, that kind of hurt," and I'd say, "Oh, well, I didn't mean it that way. I meant this," and you'd go,
Yeah.
"Okay," and I'll say, "But I'll, I take responsibility for how I made you feel," instead of
Mm-hmm.
saying something like, "Well, I'm sorry you feel that way, but that's
Yeah.
not what I meant, so it's your fault."
Yeah.
Instead of just saying like, "No, I love this person more than any other person in the world. If I don't want to hurt them, and I need to put my ego aside and realize that I'm
Yeah.
not perfect and I'm going to say things and she's not perfect either and she's going to interpret things differently than how I meant them and that's just human nature.
Yeah.
It's human natural as Kevin would say in the office. Um, but yeah, same thing. Like you would say things to me that would hurt my ego, but then I'd have to say like, hold on a second, is she right? Maybe
Mm-hmm.
I do need to take responsibility and go, even if she's not right, if it makes her feel that way, then it's something that I should change.
Well, you brought up this word ego quite a few times. And I think that
Mm-hmm.
it's really important to either define it or talk about it because I mean it's huge for both, for everybody, for all genders, but I think that I mean and specifically for you, you said like personal responsibility was like somebody is telling me that I'm doing something wrong.
Mm-hmm.
Or like that's how you took just the words personal responsibility, even though personal responsibility is not about anybody else.
Yeah.
It's literally in the word personal,
Yeah.
right?
Mm-hmm.
So, how did or like, can you define the ego? And can you, like, I don't know, like, there's like some sort of understanding of like when your ego finally has to say, I have to take personal responsibility for this.
Yeah, I mean, for me, ego is like almost in the most stereotypical, basic, like machismo, egotistical sense, where
Oh, here's a cat.
there's dot Tom.
Take a shot.
So, so my ego really is just like, not that I don't think I do anything wrong, but being called out on it
Mm-hmm.
used to trigger me, and I would get upset because I feel like like I'm being attacked.
What's being attacked?
I guess, how I see myself. Like if I'm trying to be a good husband and you tell me I did something wrong, I feel like, oh, this means I'm not a good husband, or it
Okay.
means we're gonna break up, or it means, not, of course not now, but back then that's how I would think. Like we were new, we were 20 years old or
Well,
whatever.
still, I mean, I
Yeah.
think some people do have that. So the ego, in my definition, is that part of us that is trying to stay safe.
Hmm.
That inner self that is just really trying to protect, and everything else is to protect it.
Hmm.
So our fight, flight, or fright system, deflection, disassociation, trying to get pleasure as quick as possible, all of that is the protection of that little essence.
Well, and I think you were doing the same thing in the opposite way. You didn't want to bring up stuff that bothered you because you're like, well, we're doing well right now. Like, I don't want to bring up something that's going to cause a fight. And
Right.
then so you just bury it.
Yeah.
And then when you do tell me, it's like, then I get defensive and then it becomes a whole thing. As opposed to we started learning to communicate with each other of just saying, like, oh, just tell me
Right.
when something bothers you.
Right.
And 95% of the time, we're like, oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I didn't mean it that way, but I shouldn't have said
And I
that
mean,
or whatever.
ultimately, I mean,
Usually when we're hungry or tired.
true. But I mean, ultimately, when I'm coaching my students, it really is just all around this protection mechanism that we have as humans, where we're trying to protect this ego, we're trying to protect this little spark within us that makes us us. And it's going to tell us it's better to deflect, it's better to just not take responsibility, it's better to have somebody else make decisions for us, or it's better for us to, like somebody tells me I do something wrong, just tell them no, they're wrong, right? That part within us is trying to protect itself so hard that it ultimately will just build so many walls around itself and will ultimately self destruct instead of choosing vulnerability with somebody that you're safe with, um, to be able to show that side of you and get understanding and get all of the things that the ego wants, which is love and understanding and companionship and like fulfillment. And ultimately, I mean, I know that's what you and I work on daily. And I work on it with my students to be able to go, like, okay, like this part of us that wants to stay safe, it's actually the key to unlocking like all the things that we actually want. So, we've seen time and time again where people's egos have gotten in the way of like good, possibly really good marriages, really good businesses, really good relationships with their children. And yet they still are trying, and of course it's easy for us on the outside to be like, oh my gosh, like please, like let go of that ego, let go of that protection, be vulnerable with that person or with yourself to be able to make decisions that are going to be what you ultimately want in life, instead of like, well, I just have to have that machismo part of me that needs to stay powerful and nothing can touch me. Because I don't think if you hadn't had the wherewithal that said, okay, like how do I actually have that conversation with me, about, like, and again, it was like it was the same fight over and over again, just different scenarios, right? But if you hadn't had the wherewithal to have that vulnerability, and both of us having that vulnerability to have that conversation, we probably wouldn't be married today. And look at all of the things that we would have missed out on.
Yeah.
And then you go to another partner and try again with the other partner, that stuff's still all there.
Yeah.
And of course, sometimes with other partners, I'm not saying like in course in situations where there's abuse and like just stuff, people can't have that conversation. Maybe one person is willing to have that conversation and the other person's not, and then you go to another relationship and both people are willing to have that conversation. It's amazing. That's awesome. But it's like, when both parties can have that conversation, that's when stuff actually can change for the better. And that's when things can actually start moving in the direction that both people want it to move to. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and even in, I mean, business, like whenever we have something go wrong at the salon. Not even wrong, but I mean,
It changes. I mean, stuff
yeah,
changes.
people leave,
People come, people leave,
but we always have that
systems need to
conversation.
change, etc. But if we weren't, but yeah, we have to have that conversation of like, okay, like what's going on in the business right now? What do we need to take responsibility for? If we truly believe that like our whole reality is based on the decisions that we make. Okay, what kind of decisions are we going to make, and what decisions are we going to make outside of that place of ego?
Yeah, because I mean, we have times where, if someone leaves or there's a conflict between us or, you know, stylists
Clients
or
and
clients, we have
yeah,
to check ourselves and say, are we taking responsibility for the fact that we made this mistake? And there's been times where we've made a mistake or our website wasn't clear about something and we have to like own that,
hmm,
instead of just doubling down. And we've had to apologize to stylists before, and we've had to, when sometimes stylists leave and it hurts a little bit, even though we're like, we're an open salon, you can work anywhere, go as far.
totally.
It
But it's
still
still you're
hurts.
like, oh, but I really like that
Yeah,
person.
and you're like, okay, is it? But
I want them to stay forever.
we have to take like a mental note and be like, is there something that we could be doing better to keep
Right,
people? Is it, it's ultimately our responsibility. We own the salon. So,
right.
I mean, I think about, we knew of a salon that, was probably the most popular salon in its area, had what, 30 stylists, something like that.
Hmm.
Huge, bustling, busy, tons of great hair, probably the best hair in the area. And the owner started having an affair with one of the stylists, and basically that stylist started acting like the owner, and people didn't like it, and people started leaving, and eventually he brought everyone together and said, you can all leave, and I'm staying with her no matter what." And they eventually all left, and it was like a mass exodus that he never really took responsibility for, and people just wanted.
I don't like this.
No? Why?
I don't
You
like
think people
it.
will find out?
I don't know. I just feel like it feels very gossipy.
Okay, that's fine. We can take that out.
Can we take that part out? I don't know. It just feels like too
Okay.
like there's
I can be more general.
it's too much detail.
Yeah, yeah, I got you.
Like we know of salons who don't take responsibility, have mass exits, and that's all. It doesn't need to be
Yeah, yeah.
like he had an affair.
No,
Like
you're
I
right.
don't
You're right.
know.
You're
It
right.
just feels like
Because that's pretty. You could figure that out pretty easily, probably.
yeah,
Yeah. Okay, I'll start there.
yeah. Okay,
Okay.
thank you.
Are we getting a 5, 4, 3 or no?
No,
Okay. So yeah, like I mean, we know salons that we've heard, mass exoduses and people leave. We've had people in our salon that, have said that people have walked out and the owner just doubles down. They don't think that they're doing anything wrong. They don't think that they think that they're, it's almost like they don't care how they're treating their employees, or, it's like,
yeah, and I mean, listen, there's always two sides to every story.
sure.
So, but the hard thing about leadership is that even though you want to say it's that person, it's them, it's their fault, it's their problem, they did this, etc., you still have to take responsibility that that person came into your business.
Hmm.
You still have to take responsibility that you might have seen signs on the wall and you didn't act sooner. You need to take responsibility that maybe what they're saying is right. Like there's so much to it, and yes, there are definitely times when you can be like, okay, this person was just it was them, and I couldn't have seen it coming, and I didn't see it coming, and I couldn't have done anything to change it, etc. There's still things that you still can take responsibility for. What are you going to do next? What are you going to do to rectify? Do you need to change your systems? Do you need to change things within you that are attracting a certain type of person, right? Like, even though it could, again, there's two sides. Again, as a leader, you are being held responsible to take a good hard look at yourself. Regardless if you're like, I couldn't have stopped it, etc., you still have to look within yourself and take responsibility for it.
And I think what you're saying there is totally right. Like, you need to take like a mental inventory of like, even if you are like, they're completely wrong, they
Yeah.
stole from me and all that, whatever the case may be, you still have to go, okay, let me just, and maybe even, having wise counsel, people around you that you can, that will tell you the truth if you screwed up,
Yeah.
I think is important. And talking to people about, or, here's what happened, thinking about what you can do better. I mean, we do that with our kids all the time. I mean, there's times where
Yeah.
we're wrong. We discipline our kids for something, and later on we go, oh, we did that out of anger, or we did that out of,
We didn't have all the
we didn't have all the
information or
information or
whatever
something.
it
And
was.
it's like, when you have kids, especially when they're young, oh, they will lie to you. And so sometimes it's hard to tell with, well, he pushed me first and I did that. It's like, okay, like when we're disciplining our kids, we also have to do the same thing and go, we're still fallible, even though we're the adults, and we still are going to make mistakes, and we have to apologize to them too. And we've had to do that,
But
and it's hard, but that's what's really going to show them that, hopefully show them, and not just tell them to take personal responsibility, but show them ways that we take personal responsibility in dealing with
yeah.
them.
Yeah. I mean, and again, I think if you are in any type of leadership, whether that's, even just parenthood. I mean, you're a leader if you're a parent. If you are in any kind of influence where someone's looking to you as a mentor, as an example, it is imperative that you learn the like deep ways of taking personal responsibility. And it's why you have a therapist. It's why I have coaches. I mean, you have coaches too, and in relation to me, but it's like that's why I have teachers and coaches, like because we don't exist in a vacuum, and as leaders and as parents and as humans, like it's so important to have people in your life who can call you out on it, because again, that part of us that wants to stay safe and protect our ego is so strong that it will trick you into thinking, oh, Joy, you're perfect. You didn't do anything wrong. Here's another cat. You didn't do anything wrong. And so it's really important to have people in your life who can be very honest with you about where to take responsibility for. And I know that in my own life, when I really started taking personal responsibility, that is when my life drastically started to change. And we can talk about that in another episode. But
But yeah, it
yeah,
made our relationship better. It makes our relationships with our kids better. It makes us better business owners, I hope, and
yeah,
helps us to communicate better. I mean, people always say that relationships are all about communication, which is true,
yeah.
but it's got to be two-way communicate. It's not just one way, like
But that communication starts with personal responsibility.
exactly.
So, all right. Do you have a fun antidote for us?
A fun anecdote.
Yeah.
Are we doing story time?
Let's do a little story time. I want you to, because we have an election coming up. I don't know when this episode's going to air, but maybe it just aired. But with the election coming up, I want you to talk about the time that you had an encounter with Bill Clinton.
Oh, yeah. Um, well, me and a friend were, 16, I think, at a bus stop, and all of a sudden, the cars start flying by, like news vehicles, and everyone starts pulling over, and they've got cameras and all these things, and
She's really getting
she's
in the
really
way.
getting in the way. Let me move you. Start pulling over, camera crews, all kinds of stuff, and we're just sitting there at the bus stop, like, what's happening? And then all of a sudden, more police officers than I've ever seen in my life just start flying down the road and blocking the streets and everything. And I asked one of the news guys, "What's going on?" And they said, "Oh, President Bill Clinton's like motorcade is coming by." This is right after the Monica stuff. So I was like, "Whoa! Like I have an opportunity here." So all of a sudden, maybe 50 cop cars go by, and then all of a sudden, you see the car with the flags on either corner, and the window was a little down. I saw his little gray hair, and so I went in between two cars and I pulled my pants down and gave him a little shot of the booty. And I think he saw it.
I'm sure he did.
I'm gonna take personal responsibility and say I mooned the president. So
I'm sure it's in his memoirs.
yeah, so
Yeah.
that's the story of how I mooned former President William Jefferson Clinton.
Awesome. All right. We'll see you next time.